Over and over again during this podcast, we have talked about wanting to do every mile and the mentality that cyclists get into about wanting to do every single mile, which is totally understandable. But again, the ride is your reward. And if you can't do every mile, you can't do every mile. There's one lady I picked up on sweeps, and all the cyclists out there that listen to this that think that you're not ready to do this ride, and all of us telling you it's not about every mile, listen to this, because this lady I picked up on day one, it was at mile 20. And normally on day one, if you pick up somebody that early, they are not happy campers. They are upset. They don't want to be in that vehicle. They want to ride. And she just had this ear-to-ear grin on her face. And I got her bike on the vehicle, and I finally look at her, I'm like, why are you so happy? You know, out of all the years I've done this, I've never had this. Why are you so happy? And she looks at me and she goes, the longest training ride I've ever done was 15 miles. She goes, I just bested my best by 5 miles. Today could not be a better day. And I was like, you know what? That's what it's all about, you know, and no matter how much you try to get this into people's minds, that's what it's all about. And I picked her up again on day 3, and this time it was at mile 30. And she looks at me and she goes, I'm doing 5 miles a day more than I've ever done in my life. And then she got this little sheepish grin on her face, and she looked like a little imp. And she kind of smiled and she goes, at this rate, I'll be able to do all of day 4. And I just loved it. You know, I never got a chance to see her again after that. I don't know if she completed all of day 5, all of day 5, because that's our shortest day. And I never got to find out whether she did all of day 5, but she just had this best attitude of just do what you can every single day.
That was Don Napoli giving us another quick story from the Roadie Corner and reminding us once again that AIDS life cycle is not about riding every mile. Thank you, Don, for sharing that inspiration with us. Welcome to the 5th and final AIDS Life Cycle 10 podcast. My name is Lisa Hadjidorian, and I am a cyclist representative for AIDS Life Cycle. Today's episode, we are not who you think. If you think that HIV and AIDS are only a problem for gay white men, then I hope that this podcast will help you to think again. First, we will hear from a straight woman who doesn't use drugs and was exposed to lies, deceit, and the HIV virus. Then, Darnell Green describes a new CDC-sponsored program called Common Bond, an awareness and prevention program for Black and Latino men who have sex with other men but do not necessarily identify as being gay. Now, this program is supported by the Center for Disease Control itself and not AIDS Life Cycle, so you'll be finding out what the connection is there and why that's important. Plus more coming up in just a few beats. And now, Rana shares her story as a straight woman who doesn't use drugs and who is exposed to the HIV virus. She is HIV negative and healthy today, due in part to the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Center. Here's Rana.
So about 9 years ago, I'd gotten involved with someone that I had known for 6 years who was a dear friend of mine. And I went up to see him. We'd kind of had this little thing going on for a few years, and we were in a position where we were both single and tried to make something work. And he was living in a different city than I was, so I went to see him. And, you know, it's funny to me that you can build a trust with somebody over the years as a friend and not know the biggest details about their lives. So I went up to see him, and we had the conversations that you have. This was 9 years ago, so back when you thought it was safe to have those conversations. So have you been tested for everything? You're okay? And they say yes, and you just believe them, because I think that there was, for quite some time after the original HIV scare, and maybe I'm incorrect in different circles of people, but it seemed to me that there was a kind of a time period where people kind of forgot about it, you know what I mean? Like, they forgot about it for a couple of minutes, and 81 was the first documented case. And it just seemed after the 80s to kind of die down a little bit as far as awareness in my circle of friends. And it just seemed to kind of be swept under the rug a little bit. So we had the conversation, and he said that he had been tested for everything and that he's fine. And because we had had a rapport, I believed him, and we had unprotected sex, and I thought that that was okay, and I trusted the guy, and it was getting onto my third day up there with him, and he had gone to work, and I was looking in the medicine chest for some aspirin, and I found what I thought was HIV medication. And oddly enough, and this is kind of a silly part of it, my girlfriends and I were home the week before watching like some Sex and the City episode, and one of my girlfriends just blurts out, "Hey, there's a morning after pill for HIV, did you hear?" Like, just some like random little quirk that she would throw out, whatever. And I just went, "Yeah, okay, whatever," and we kind of just brushed it off. Had she not said that, I would have had no idea. I had absolutely no awareness that existed. I was in San Francisco, and I was by myself and just really scared, and I didn't know what to do, and I went to a clinic, and they had me call him on the phone. I called him, and you know, I asked him if he was positive, and his response was, "I can't talk about this, I'm at work." And I said, "I'm at a clinic, and we're going to talk about this." So I found out that he was, in fact, HIV positive, and they put me on a couple of pills and told me to see my specialist when I got back home, or see my doctor when I got back home. And it turned out my internist happened to be an HIV specialist, which I had no idea that he was, and we talked about what happened, and I had a really hard time with it. I went through that, I guess you go through the 5 stages of grief in a way, you know, and I was kind of in denial and kind of scared, and I was terrified, actually. And my first thought was, who am I ever going to be with again? Like, that was my immediate first thought after, am I going to die? Because it was still 9 years ago, there wasn't the information that they have now. So my doctor gave me a prescription, and I went to the pharmacy, and it was something outrageous, like $1,200 for 2 bottles of medication. I didn't know what I was going to do, and someone suggested that I go to the Gay and Lesbian Center because they have a pharmacy there, and they gave me the medication for free. It was a 30-day regimen, which I know one of them was Combivir, and I can't remember what the other one was, but they use it as a preventative medication. When if you're exposed under 72 hours, there's a window, and they can put you on this medication. And they gave it to me for free, and I went back and saw my doctor. You know, obviously I had to go for testing constantly the first year, and I went back to my doctor, and he basically told me that if I hadn't gotten on that medication, he said I was such high risk for being infected that he was pretty sure I would have had it had I not gotten on this medication. And I guess that year it was really challenging for me because you still don't know if you have it or not. It changed me. It definitely changed me as a person. This isn't a disease where only gay people are affected or only people that have used needles are infected. It doesn't discriminate.
What would you say to a young woman today, who is getting a pressure from a newly found boyfriend or lover to have unprotected sex.
Don't do it. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. You know, unless you know, if this is somebody that you're in a relationship with, it's my feeling that that if they care about you and they care about your life and they care about your body and they care about you as a person, that they'll go with you and get tested so that you know. And until you have that information, why take a chance? You know, it's a kind of a cliche, but like, you don't know who you're getting in bed with. You know what I mean? Like, you just never know. I knew this guy for 6 years and had absolutely no idea that he was positive. I have a friend who's been doing the ride for 6 years now. This is his 6th year, and I don't think I had processed what I went through emotionally in a full circle until now, because I just felt like he started talking to me about the ride, and we went to just one of the things that his team had put on at the beginning of the season, and I wanted to sign up to be a roadie, and I ended up signing up as a cyclist in case I needed to drop down to a roadie. And for me, the more that I've gotten involved with it and the more that I've spent time around the office and the people that are involved with it, I haven't met better people. I have not, I'm going to get all emotional now. I haven't met better people in Los Angeles, and I haven't met people who give so much of themselves to this. And I just knew that it was my time to give back to the people that saved my life, and to the people that are positive, who are struggling, who can't afford their medications. And I guess I forgot that even though I went through that 1 month of not being able to afford my medicine, there are people who go through that every month. And I need to do whatever I can to give back to them. And to, you know, another thing was that I never told people my story. My closest friends knew what happened to me, but nobody really knew. And what I've realized from being involved in this and being involved in this amazing ride is that I've been part of the stigma, in a sense, for a lot of years, because I'm not being part of the solution. I just realized that it was time to be part of the solution and let people know what happened to me. It's not embarrassing. It's not anything that I shouldn't talk about. I don't know if it was just the right time for me to do this, or I don't know why things happen the way that they do or when they do, but I just knew that it was time for me to make a difference.
Donors and riders of AIDS Life Cycle 1 and 2, your donation dollars help provide the funding for Rana's medications. So maybe you helped to save her life. Rana is now bringing that good karma back by participating in AIDS Life Cycle this year, as well as volunteering in the office. And it's been a pleasure to have her. Dane Blackburn sat down with Darnell Green of Common Bond to find out how this CDC-funded program is helping to prevent the spread of HIV and AIDS, as well as help to bring awareness for the underserved Black and Latino communities. Here now, Dane and Darnell.
This is Dane Blackburn, recruitment coordinator at AIDS Life Cycle, here with Mr. Darnell Green.
Hello.
Darnell Green is the facilitator of a program called Many Men, Many Voices. And this is an organization geared towards Black and Latino men who have sex with other men, but who may not identify themselves as being gay. Darnell, can you kind of elaborate on what the mission of this program is?
Well, yes, the name is Many Men, Many Voices, but we just currently renamed the program to Common Bond. So we are the Common Bond program now. And Many Men, Many Voices is our tagline or our slogan now. So basically the program, it's about community building. It's about fellowship, getting men together in the African American Latino community that usually wouldn't have conversations about their sexual orientation, sexual behavior, racism, homophobia, what it's like to be a Black man, a Latino man, a man who has sex with other men, whether you identify as gay or not. Just getting them in a safe space to have these conversations. That's really what Common Bond, Many Men, Many Voices is all about.
That's awesome. Well, I can tell just from how you're elaborating about that this program is something that's near and dear to your heart.
Yes.
Tell us, why is it near and dear to your heart?
Well, I've been working in probably about my third CDC-funded prevention program. So I'm very passionate about giving back to my community. I actually trained under a program called Brother to Brother, which was a 2-year initiative for Black and Latino men who have sex with men in Cleveland, Ohio. And they taught us how to work in the nonprofit sector. They taught us how to give back. They taught us how to serve our community. We know that HIV and AIDS affects Black and Latino men at alarming rates. So it was definitely about teaching men how to give back to the community and which they're a part of.
That's awesome. Now, when you're speaking about how HIV and AIDS affects Black and Latino men at an alarming rate, I'm going to go ahead and read some facts that I've done a little research about. First, addressing something in San Francisco, what I found is that the survival rate after an AIDS diagnosis is worse for African Americans than other racial or ethnic groups. Among those diagnosed with AIDS between the year 1996 and 2009, the percent of African Americans surviving 5 years was 73%, whereas compared with 81% for whites, 83% for Latinos, and 86% for Asians and Pacific Islanders. In Los Angeles, African Americans comprise less than 9% of this city's population, and they account for 22% of those living with HIV and AIDS. And California as a whole, African Americans account for nearly 18% of those living with HIV and AIDS. Now, again, alarming dichotomies between Blacks, Latinos, and the rest of the population. In terms of how this is being addressed, what is your program doing to address this?
Well, really, the CDC stated in December that the Center for Disease Control, they stated 1 in 16 Black men will be infected with HIV within his lifetime. And the statistics also state that the highest infection rates are amongst men who have sex with men. Part of our mission and part of our goal with our program is to get men in a safe space to talk about sexual orientation, sexual behavior. Being gay in the Black and Latino community is associated with a lot of shame a lot of times. And so it's hard for men to talk about their sexual orientation, their sexual behavior amongst their friends. A lot of them are just having sex and not really dealing with the repercussions of sex, dealing with getting tested for HIV, tested for STDs. So it's up to us to help men and also facilitate these conversations and help them to have this dialogue. We have a retreat in which we go on, which we take men out of the city, we take them out of LA for the weekend, and we give them the chance just to bond and to really get an opportunity to scratch the surface and meet each other and have conversations as to where if they saw each other in the street or amongst friends, they wouldn't have these conversations. Through this process, we definitely want to encourage testing and just encourage condom negotiation. Building this level of comfort amongst these men will also help them to be able to have this level of comfort when they're having sex with one another. So that's the goal.
Now, when you're asking these men to become a voice in their communities, become a strong presence in their communities, is it safe to say that a lot of people within their communities are turning a blind eye towards the reality of what this rate of infection is?
Definitely. I mean, there's so much stigma associated with HIV, AIDS in the Black community, and there's so many factors that prevent people from going to get help, if they need help. That's why in the race that you said, like, Black men are so much more likely to be infected and not go and get tested, or which doesn't lead to them being treated or anything like that. So the death rate is a lot higher within the African American community because of the shame and the stigma and everything that's associated with HIV. It's just time for us to start taking, and I'm including myself as a Black man, just for us to start taking our accountability for our own lives and then being leaders of our own lives and being accountable for what we do, with ourselves, and then taking that back into the community, and hopefully it'll have a ripple effect and ignite the community.
That's awesome. Now, going back to the CDC, your program, Common Bond, is being funded not by AIDS Life Cycle, which I clearly represent, but actually by the CDC. Why is this a big deal for your organization and the center as a whole?
Well, this is a big deal for the LA Gay and Lesbian Center because, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first direct CDC-funded program here at the center, which that's major. To me, that says that the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Center has definitely been paying attention to the rates of HIV in the African American Latino community, and they responded with writing this grant and to get funded so that we can reach this community. That's powerful to me. You know what I mean? I think it definitely shows that the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Center is stepping out and definitely doing its part to help a community that's definitely underserved.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And now, my personal message to you as we ramp up for this monumentous event we call AIDS Life Cycle 10. With a tip of the hat to Ted Sorensen, JFK, and Heather Small, I give you Proud of Us together. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our community and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow AIDS life cyclers, ask not what this community can do for you. Ask what you can bring to this community. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what AIDS Life Cycle will do for you, but what together we can do to bring an end to this disease. Finally, whether you are a writer, a roadie, or a volunteer, ask of us here at AIDS Life Cycle the same high standards of strength and sacrifice which we ask of you. With good conscience, our only sure reward. With history being the final judge of whether we are the generation to end AIDS. Let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking for blessings, understanding, and help, but knowing that the truly important work must truly be our own.